What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this I want to talk about what's going on with the overall market and give you guys some price predictions for the stocks right now. I'm also going to break down what's happening to SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. Talk about what the technicals are suggesting, what's going on with the catalysts affecting the market, what you should be watching for going into tomorrow and beyond. But before I do anything like this, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon. It ends in just about 3 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, guys, looking at SPY, this thing was down 0.06% for the day on Friday. And the real question is, will we end up basing around this support level, or is the market about to sink lower? And my answer will be based off what we see in the morning in terms of news and also based off what technicals are suggesting. But first, let's talk about the data coming out. So just as a reminder, we're going to see some volatility tomorrow in the morning this is going to be around 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. For the consumer inflationary expectations reports, the market does tend to move when these come out. And what's good about this is inflationary expectations haven't been that bad so far. This may not cause like that horrible of a move. So we will see what this causes moving forward. But for now, at least for the longer term, they haven't been that bad. So hopefully this causes more volatility, but it isn't too bad for the overall markets. And then going into earnings, we have a couple of them coming out. We have like Green Power, some energy companies releasing their earnings, Monday.com, and a few others. Then we have lots of retail for this week. We have the Home Depot, we have Target, we have Cisco and Walmart, and the list goes on, like Ross and Xbox. So it's going to be very interesting to witness all these different earnings, and they're going to have a profound effect on the stocks of every single one of them. So it's going to be very interesting to watch, especially to see how retail sales are looking for this quarter and what guidance is looking like as well. But now let's quickly go over these charts. I also want to warn you guys, I'm going to be a little quick today because I have a lot going on for Sunday. So I want to just finish this. Let me just mention that when looking at the charts, things are looking very, very decent so far because when you look at SPY, we've been developing this bullish divergence for the time being. Like I said earlier, right? We have this triple bullish divergence. SPY was making new lows 3 times. 3 new lows were made, but the MACD was making higher lows. This is actually like a triple or maybe a quadruple bullish divergence on the MACD. On the RSI, it's a triple. So this is once again some nice stuff for SPY. We have the same thing on Tesla and the QQQ, as I mentioned earlier in my video from yesterday. And then you also want to remember that it's not just about simply looking at different things on the charts. You also want to look at trend lines. So I have NEO right here, but we want to look at like SPY, for instance. Looking at SPY, something very interesting is developed on the chart. We have this very, very nice looking setup, right? We have this nice falling wedge that's been developing, which tends to be bullish, or at least lead to a bullish outcome. And then secondly, we have this confluence of many different supports, which I talked about yesterday. So we have this very, very critical support right here. This was previous resistance, which is where we got the cup and handle breakout. So this was support. This 444 level was the breakout area. We just retested that. So that's acting as support. This trend line right here, the blue one, this is acting as support as well. And then we have the falling wedge support. So we have lots of different supports. If we get a break to the upside, right, we have this resistance right here, very close to like 450 or so, if not 448, depending on how long it takes. So I believe what's happening in the market is this. The market's trying to base at this 444 level. Now, if we get a really bad piece of news, it is possible for us to break below this. And if that were to happen, you're going to continue to look at the wedge and look at the low from Friday and the 443s. If they all break, then 442 is a possibility. But right now, I find it less probable because of the fact that the market's trying to base, the market's holding up. I'm not really seeing any major like negative piece of news this weekend. If it happens tomorrow, it's a possibility, but I'm not really seeing it right now. So at the time I'm recording this, it seems more probable that we're going to see the market attempt to bounce very soon. It seems a little bit more probable because of the bullish divergences, because of how the market's been trying to base at this 444 level or very close to it. You could see we touched this level many, many times, forming a bullish divergence, yet the market is not broken down. It's just trying to base around here. It looks like it's trying to like form this accumulation right over here. We could even be forming kind of like an inverse head and shoulders like structure right here on SPY. So what I find to be the most probable outcome would be, first off, be prepared for some crazy volatility. I can't predict everything perfectly in a market like this because the volatility has been insane and there's a lots of manipulation. But what I find to be very probable looking at the bullish divergence would be us retesting this 444 level on SPY. Maybe we like gap down or something. Maybe the market starts off a little weak. And then I'm going to be looking for a bounce. I think there's going to be a good chance of us making our way back up to this 448 level on either Monday or Tuesday. And I think it's very probable that that's going to happen, right? Uh, it does depend on the news, of course, but I think that from a technical standpoint, that's very probable. We could be forming like a right shoulder, so come down a little bit, then get a nice bounce and a push up to 448 or so at our 200 EMA on SPY. Now, there could be a little downside to start off. Once again, a retest of 444 or so before the bounce. And as long as that holds, if we do manage to see buyers stepping in at 444, if you see lots of like wicks forming on the candlesticks, right, on the bottoms, that could be a signal that the market is getting ready to do the opposite. And there have been some instances where the first move is the wrong move. So like we drop in the morning before pumping, or we like pump and then we come back down a little bit later. So be aware of that. That makes me think that the market may sink in the morning, then get a nice bounce later on. I find that more probable. Now, I want to talk about AMC just very, very briefly. I mean, there is this news that came out that the settlement for their court case has been approved. This basically just means that AMC has a much higher probability of converting their APE equity units into AMC shares, which is technically bearish news for them. That's why AMC is down 25%, being diluted by APE, which does not have as much intrinsic value, whereas APE is becoming, or it has the potential to turn into an asset, which is why APE is going up. So AMC is going to try to base soon. I think like 3.5 or so may be retested. Could drop a little bit lower and then continue to form a bullish divergence, then bounce and make its way back up to $4. And I think it's going to try to like trade sideways from there. Looking at Tesla, I believe there are two possibilities for it. It might retest 240 and then try to bounce off that. But if it breaks below 240 and fails to hold it, we could see like 238 be retested. If that fails us, it could go all the way down to 235 and then try to bounce. So either it drops a little bit and then it bounces, or it just bounces from here. It's got to be one of those two depending on the news from the morning. And I find that very, very probable. Tesla also has a falling wedge, a bullish divergence that has developed, but I don't think that the bigger move is going to be the downside, at least to start off this week from a technical standpoint. I think it either drops just a couple more dollars, either tests like 240 again. Maybe it goes a little bit lower than that, just a couple more dollars down before this thing bounces, or it might just bounce from here. It's got to be one of those two. So looking for a drop in a bounce or a bounce from here, and it's going to make its way back up to 250 later on this week, in my opinion. I find that very probable looking at the bullish divergence in the current setup, but always be open-minded just in case there's bad news. I'm always open-minded for that external factor, but for now, I just think that this is the most probable outcome looking at the current technicals and the bullish falling wedge on Tesla that has developed, right? We have this really nice looking bullish falling wedge, and these are like the two main possibilities I'm eyeing towards, right? Either it bounces here, or it comes down a little lower, continuing with the divergence, and it bounces. Really nice wedges forming. Look for the breakout. So watch that very carefully on Tesla. For the IWM, just to be clear, this is forming a very similar looking setup. It has a triple or quadruple bullish divergence. I think this is a triple. Uh, yeah, it's a triple basically that formed. This could also be developing into something completely new. We have a triple on the MACD as well. So I'm going to be looking for this thing to come down, maybe gap down, retest this 189 area. If it can make a higher high, or even if it goes a little lower and forms another divergence, we could see this thing bounce a little bit later. So a drop and a bounce looks very probable for a retest of 192. That's what I'm looking for on the Russell 2000. Looking at Apple stock, I think the same thing is forming. Apple just got smacked really, really hard, but it looks like it could be forming an inverse head and shoulders like structure. It could be on its way to trade sideways and get a push up back to 180. And I think that's very probable looking at this triple bullish divergence and this wedge that formed on it. It has a falling wedge as well. So I think it's very probable Apple is going to trade sideways and get a bounce and push for 180 very soon. I'm leaning more in that direction. For the triple Q, if this thing were to break lower, there's 363, 360, and etc., like 357 as supports. But like I showed you guys in my video from yesterday, this is forming a nice wedge, and it's looking a lot stronger than before as it's continuing to form these divergences. I believe there's a good chance that this thing is going to retest. It might start off kind of weak, make it's gonna range trade between like 368 to like 365, come down to 365, retest it, and it might be forming a very, very nice base around there. Then it's going to get a bounce and make its way back up to 370 plus. I find that very probable for the triple Q over the next couple of days. What about Nvidia? Could this thing drop more? I think the answer is yes. It still could drop a little bit more because on the 30-minute time frame, when you zoom out of it, it kind of looks like this, very distributive still. And I believe that we could see Nvidia try to base around this 400 area, maybe a little bit lower, very, very close to 400 or so. And then what's going to happen is once it finds its bottom, it's going to bottom very soon, basically. That's what I'm trying to aim towards. It could drop a little bit more. 400 is on the table, very high, 390s to 400. Could drop a little bit more, then try to get a really nice bounce. I'm going to be looking for this thing to get a nice bounce because it's been forming it technically has a triple bullish divergence, but it's not as clean as the other charts. It mainly has a double one that's cleaner. So I think it's going to drop a little bit more and then try to bounce and make its way back up to about 416, then 421. I find that very probable for Nvidia. The news will affect it as well, but just to be safe, we're going to be watching just to see, and I still think that's very probable. For Microsoft, this thing is also forming this bullish divergence right here. I think this thing has the potential to try to base around here and then start pushing back up to about 325, or it could drop and retest 320 and then try to bounce for 325 or so. I find that very likely. For AMD, same thing. Excuse me, sorry guys. AMD is just not looking that great. I could see it dropping a little bit more like Nvidia. We could see this thing hit 105, a little bit lower than that. I wouldn't rule out like 102 to 105. I think it could drop a little bit more, then try to balance and make its way back up to about 107 and make it a flat stay tomorrow. But then later on, I could see it trying to make its way up to about 111 or so. That's what I'm seeing for that. For Netflix, same thing basically. Netflix is continuing to downtrend, but there is a bullish divergence on it as well. It's not as strong though, so it's not going to look like it bounces very strongly. It might come down to like 420, maybe a little lower, 416 to 420, base around here, then try to bounce and make its way back up to about 426. I'm not expecting it to be that crazy unless there's some news, but it doesn't look that great for a very, very massive bounce or anything like that. The NASDAQ, it's also forming a very strong divergence. So I'm thinking that this thing might either bottom here and try to make its way up above 13,760, if not even a higher level than that, to get closer to like 14K. Or what could happen is it drops a little bit more, hits like 13,500, and then it bounces to get to those higher levels. For the VIX, this is once again not looking that great, not looking that bad either. Could this be like a sloppy looking head and shoulders? This looks kind of distributive. We also have this gap down here. I don't think it filled the gap that's down here in the 13s. So it makes me a little suspicious that, the VIX could be forming actually like a head and shoulders like structure and instead of like just a double bottom. It could be that this is forming a left shoulder. This is the head and the right shoulders forming. It's going to come all the way back down to the 13s. If that's the case, this could be because of the market bouncing, causing that to drop, and I find that very probable. For the dollar index, this hasn't really done much. It's just kind of like trading sideways. We are about to get a bearish cross in the 30 minutes PPO, so it has this imbalance down here around this 102.4 area. If it rejects off 103, it might push a little higher to 103, then reject and come down to about 102.4. So that tells me we might see a little bit of downside for it and upside for this. Now, there could also be like a bullish triangle developing that could change this. That is another possibility, but we have to wait and see on this. It looks to me like it might actually start cooling off a little bit. It did technically form a bearish divergence technically right about here because the RSI was higher and this was like a little bit lower. The RSI made a lower high, whereas the price made a higher high, so the dollar may cool off, which could be bullish for the market. So I find that very probable. For Coinbase, it really depends on if it could base around this 80 level. Still looks kind of weak, but I don't see a very strong divergence on it. I'm going to be watching this 80 level. If that fails, the 77 is on the table before it bounces. Then it's going to make its way back up to 84 plus. I find that very probable, but it's going to base quickly first. For Amazon, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders. I think it's going to come down to about this 137.5 area, then try to bounce and push up for about 140 over the next couple of days. I find that very, very probable. If it breaks below 137, however, 136 is on the table, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to try to bounce. For Meta as well, we could see Meta sink a little bit lower. It's continuing to downtrend. It's going to try to base at 300. It depends on if the buyers come at 300. If they come, it's going to balance and make its way up to about 308 plus and then try to continue going. If they don't step in, we could go a little bit lower into like the 295 area, if not a little lower than that, before it tries to base. So we'll have to wait and see if it goes a little lower and bounces or if it just bounces from here. But I think the bounce will be the bigger move for it. Now, for Google, same thing. I mean, this thing has a very similar structure as Amazon. Nice inverse hand shoulders is like forming. We could see it push back up to about 132 very, very soon. But first, it may actually come down to about 128.9 and then try to base. Might not drop that low, could just start pushing as soon as Monday. So I'm going to be looking for a bounce. So I find that to be very probable for the market going into tomorrow. Uh, I'm going to be watching these charts very carefully. One other thing worth mentioning about SPY is this could be a bullish structure that's developing too on it, even in like the shorter time frame. So I'm just going to be watching these levels, guys. I find these predictions I made very probable. So please watch your charts and do what you have to do. I want the best for everyone. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a great weekend. Enjoy football Sunday. We have a lot of kickoffs starting very soon, and I just want the best for everyone. Thank you. Have a great day. Market to the moon as the long term is very, very bright. And peace out.